From the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down the roster moves the Broncos had to get to the 53-man roster, as well as what they're adding back to the practice squad. Benjamin, a lot of what they ultimately did with the 53-man roster was a bit projected on Broncos Country Tonight, both the TV show as well as radio. But I wanted to kind of dial in a little bit on what they did sort of the back end of things, where they had to temporarily release a couple of guys that are going to be contributors this year, Mike Purcell and Eric Tomlinson.
Well, yeah, in order to float some of these guys to the short-term IR rather than cancel them out for the season on the long-term IR, they had to carry them for an extra day. That meant you're going to have to make some belt-tightening moves. They just talked to Tomlinson and Purcell, said, hey, look, we're bringing you guys back. Here's what we'll do. And so that they agree to, they work it out ahead of time. Hey, we agree to do this. We're going to be cut for a day and then brought back, that kind of stuff. It's a procedural move, and that allows them to get guys like Michael Ojemudia and Greg Dulcich to the short-term IR. You bring Purcell and you bring Tomlinson back today, and then you start signing your practice squad guys, and there you go.
There weren't any of the Broncos released, waived, or whatever players claimed on waivers. There were no players that were waived, claimed off there. So the Broncos are free to bring back, and as we know right now, they already have brought back quite a few of them.
Yeah, I guess like McTelvin, Moody, Van Hicks, the draft pick. They're bringing those guys back. As far as nobody getting claimed, I think there were two guys that were at risk of being claimed, and that's why they kept both of them. That's quarterback Brett Rippon and wide receiver Jalen Virgil. Both those guys would have been claimed if they'd been put through waivers, and they knew that. So that was the reason that they hung on to both those. And the Josh Johnson thing, we explained that at length, but basically it's a given that they knew Brett, if they waived him because he was subject to waivers, didn't have 4 years as a vested vet. They knew he was subjected to waivers. You could cut Josh, tell him, go hang out your place for a day. We're going to sign you back tomorrow because Josh obviously has more than an accrued 4 years of service. So, procedural move that allows him to keep all three quarterbacks.
Well, it's an important one. And this time of year, much like we're seeing with Dulcich and Ojemudia, if you put them on IR yesterday, they're done for the year. You need to do a little gymnastics in order to make this work. I think the quarterback is just another example of that. Now, Brett earned the backup role. Don't get it wrong. He absolutely earned that role, but if they would have done it the other way around, say they wanted to keep both guys, they went the other way around, they risk not getting both guys in the building. And you said it perfectly on Broncos Country Tonight yesterday, just talking about how the practice squad has become just an extension, a taxi squad for your ultimate 53-man roster.
It really has. There's almost no distinction anymore. I mean, there's a few rules that are in the way, and obviously there's a prestige factor of making the 53, but being on the practice squad is basically being on the team anymore with how large it is, the number of call-ups, and the rules for veterans being allowed on it. There's not really much of a difference in terms of all that, and I don't know why they just, instead of calling it the practice squad, just expand roster sizes, but that's me.
Yeah, I still feel like, and probably another show one of these days, some of the roster requirements, game day especially, game day actives versus inactives, it's been antiquated.
Well, it's to NASCAR, the NFL. It's to make sure that everybody is operating under the same set of rules, because what you could do is, the Patriots during the height of their run, if you'd had larger rosters, just stack the roster with cheap bets looking to chase a ring. Well, now all of a sudden you've got 90 players that are all the good guys are going there. So it's designed to enforce parity and symmetry around there. And if you have to keep the same number of people active every week, well, that limits what you can do. If you had been allowed to keep everybody active, I think Chip Kelly might have succeeded in the NFL. He would have had quite a few more defensive players and been able to keep his defenses from getting gassed.
Well, what about, I guess, again, it's a great point. It's a great point you bring up. But what about, there's a happy medium in there. You're going from 48, right, to 90. I'm even just saying the active 53.
And I agree with that. I think the 50, I don't think there should be actives and inactives. I think you should have 53. And that's, if that's your roster, that's your roster. I
see your point, though. Yeah.
But the idea, I'm just telling you why they do that. Not that I necessarily agree with it.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so the Broncos will, after moving Michael Ojemudia and Greg Dulcich to short-term IR, probably be looking to add a little bit here. And I know they don't have any spaces open right now, but again, that doesn't mean they can't create. So cornerback is one that you've brought up multiple times on the show. Faion Hicks is back in the practice squad, but it seems like they'd like a little bit more depth there.
They would, and I would not be surprised to see them get a corner, maybe even two of them beyond Faion Hicks to add to the practice squad. Eventually, the regular roster.
Quan McMillan's also back,
right? But I mean, what I'm saying is outside of what they have. I don't think they're comfortable with those guys starting football games if in a pinch if they needed them, and so I think that they're going to continue to look for defensive backs. They're going to continue to look to see what's out there and go kind of from there. I think you could see early on in the season, especially with Ojemudia out, you could see scenarios where Caden Stearns is playing the high safety more and K-Jack is dropping down into a corner position in dime zone packages, to give them more depth and talent on the field. So, but they are looking. They're looking for corners. Wouldn't be surprised to see them, bring 2-3 guys in and then sign one or two of them.
Surprised they didn't do any waiver claims?
No, not really. When you do a waiver claim, you're inheriting the contract. A lot of times these guys that are getting waived that you do have interest in, you don't want to inherit their contract, especially with veterans where it's fully guaranteed for the year if they're on the roster. Right. You wait till week 2, and then all of a sudden now the contract doesn't have to be guaranteed for the entire year. It's a procedural move, and then you can bring them in.
Again, that's some of the gymnastics that we oftentimes see around this time, and an acknowledgement of why the 53-man roster, you have some deadlines, but there's some fluidity in all of it. There's still some moving pieces on this thing. Just because yesterday you had to get to 53, now you're in a position where you're going to add practice squad. There's a couple guys going to go on IR, and then you're going to be bringing back a couple players. So understanding that the Broncos are not done yet. And that's a little bit of the position we're in right now. As far as any other things that came out of this that we learned about the Broncos, about what they're ultimately wanting this roster to look like. I had a chance to chat with George Payton yesterday on KOA, and the emphasis on special teams is such a big one. And I know that goes without saying most of the time. It's not like any GMs or coaches ignore that, but this team really did take into character the culture they're trying to build.
Well, you and I talked about that yesterday with Steve Atwater, and I made a crack about Dwayne Stukes. I'm saying his voice must be massive in that room right now.
Well, Aaron Patrick being on this team.
That's what I'm saying.
Right now.
Aaron Patrick wouldn't be on this team if it wasn't for Dwayne Stukes, and obviously that carries some weight with Tyree Cleveland as well. So, I think I don't know. I hope that's a good thing. I do. I don't know that I would necessarily cater to my special teams coach on that kind of stuff. I think I would probably say, hey, here's our 53, coach those guys up that I gave you. But, they're catering to the Dwayne Stukes definitely has a voice in the room, and they're catering to some of that as well. So we'll see how that shakes out. Time will tell.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a focus this year. And anyways, with the back end roster guys, that's mostly the case. The wide receiver room is the only one that Hinton's back on the practice squad, but that was the one that I wondered if like a Tyler Johnson or something like that, who was waived by the Bucs, if the Broncos would take a little bit of a swing there.
He was picked up by somebody, and I don't remember whom, but he was picked up by somebody.
Yeah, no, I know he was. I saw it earlier today.
So was Leatherwood, the guys.
Yeah, Leatherwood picked up by the Bears.
Yeah, there were the guys, Tyler Johnson, I think, I don't want to say, it wasn't the Eagles because that was Kellen Mond, but Tyler Johnson was picked up by somebody. And
the Texans.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, and that makes sense too, especially with, opposite Cooks and all that. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think he fits in with what they want to do down there in terms of what Pep Hamilton wants to run. So,
all right, so overall thoughts here on what the Broncos were able to do with their 53-man roster and what the practice squad sort of looks like right now.
I think an emphasis on George Payton's players. I don't think they're cleaning house on John Elway, but the players that George Payton has tied himself to, he's betting on the roster. They kept some of the Elway players and brought them back, but mostly it's George Payton's show. It's going to be the George Payton show. This team has started to take on the vision of George Payton.
All right. We'll have more to break down coming up next week. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.
Denver's going to win! You can stand up and salute in Denver, and you got the world champions that live in your town.